Hello, everyone. It's April 9th. It's Thursday. Here in Minnesota, we had snow flying horizontally. And 2 days ago, we had 72 degrees. So I hope you all have better weather than we do. My name is Kelly Pursell, and I'm the owner of Beyond Indigo Pets. Welcome today to our live presentation. We're going to hear some pretty interesting news today that may be a little startling for people. We have Stacy Pursell. She's the owner and founder of the Vet Recruiter, and she sees more of a national level with all her clients, and she's going to talk about some of the patterns she's seeing right now in her kind of view of the world. So I'm excited to hear about it. Stacy, you want to take it away?
Sure. Well, hi, everyone, and thank you, Kelly and Beyond Indigo, for having me here today. There are a couple things that I want to address first, and one is the fact that on March 28th, the Department of Homeland Security issued something called the Guidance on the Essential Critical Infrastructure Workforce. And this document listed workers who are deemed essential to infrastructure. And it's good news that veterinary clinics and pet stores were included in this list. So many veterinary hospitals and veterinary practices across the country are still up and running and open for business. And I am talking with veterinary practices all over the country on a daily basis. And I am talking with some businesses right now who, believe it or not, and I was surprised to hear this, whose businesses are thriving during this time. I spoke with one veterinarian last week who told me that his practice is up 25% since the pandemic. And I asked him why, and he said because one of the other big practices in his area had either closed their doors or had reduced their hours. I've spoken with others who have said their business is doing well. Some have said great, some have said good. I've talked to some businesses who have said that their business is the same as it was last year. But then there's also the flip side of the coin. I've also spoken with practices who are down 15 to 20%, and I've heard that some are down as much as 30%. The other good news is that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration lifted restrictions on telemedicine. And what I am hearing is that some of the practices that are incorporating technology, such as telemedicine, are doing better than some of the veterinary practices who are not. And I've also heard that the use of telemedicine has doubled, if not tripled, during this time. Today, I'm going to address both employers and professionals in the marketplace, but I'd like to start with employers. And I understand that with current conditions the way that they are, that some employers are hunkering down, especially when it comes to hiring. They might be putting a hold on interviewing candidates, or they might be pausing their hiring and searches for finding talent. And that's because they could be sensing danger in the economy and in the overall marketplace right now. As a result, some employers are letting fear make decisions for them. When we let fear make our decisions, it is more difficult to make rational decisions. I believe that some employers, especially those whose veterinary practices are thriving, could instead, and if we could change the slide up, please, to the next slide. Some of the practices who are thriving could instead be taking the advice of financial guru Warren Buffett, who said the following: be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. And I think that everyone would agree that Warren Buffett has a successful track record. After all, his net worth was $71.5 billion at the beginning of 2020. Before this pandemic began, the battle for top talent was fierce, especially in the veterinary industry, where talent has been in high demand. That talent still exists in the marketplace today. And if some employers have decided that they no longer want to pursue that talent, then this is a prime opportunity for your organization to do so if you have a hiring need. Now, this may come as a surprise to some people, but there are many employers who have not put a stop to their recruiting and hiring efforts. Our company, the Vet Recruiter, has clients who are telling us that this is a great time to interview, since some of their competitors are pausing on hiring or even laying off people. Now, we haven't heard about many veterinarians getting laid off. We have heard some staff or kennel workers have been furloughed. But I also want to let you know that we're continuing to get new clients and new searches from veterinary practices who are hiring during this pandemic. We have some clients that are telling us that as soon as this pandemic is over, that they think that there will be a surge in the economy and they don't want to be left behind. They think this is a temporary thing. I hope that they're right. But veterinary practices can continue to interview and build your teams at this time, especially if you have a critical hiring need. You might be able to hire some talented people away from your competition. If your competition is in fear mode, then that means that your competition is focusing more on the perceived levels of danger in the marketplace instead of focusing on some of the actual opportunities that exist. And I'm not saying that there isn't danger out there. I know this virus is dangerous. I'm aware of the impact that it has had on people, our economy, and businesses. What I'm talking about is that if your organization has a critical hiring need, that this could be a good time to seek out those top performers for your organization. If your competition is fearful of current conditions, then you could take the opportunity and recruit top talent away from your competition. Did you know that last week we received an increase of resumes from veterinarians who were looking for other positions? And these were not unemployed veterinarians. These are employed veterinarians. And some of them stated that they're looking because they don't like how their current employer is handling the COVID-19 situation. Next slide, please. You could be asking yourself, how are employers hiring right now with many states on lockdown and with all of the social distancing that is happening in society? Well, employers are getting creative. They're using technology. In fact, a candidate of the Vet Recruiter recently completed a drive-through interview, and that's exactly what it sounds like. The employer conducted an interview with the candidate through what was basically a drive-through window at their veterinary practice for clients to drop off pets in the morning through this window. So where there's a will, there's a way, as they say. And I applaud this type of approach and this mentality. You have to get creative in this type of environment, and that's exactly what some organizations are doing right now. Now, I know that not every veterinary practice has a drive-through window that they can use to conduct interviews, and that's why many practices are turning to video interviews. Right after the quarantine started happening, our clients immediately started moving from face-to-face, in-person interviews to video-based interviews. And what they are doing is that someone in their organization is basically recording a video of the inside of the practice to show candidates where they'll be working during the where they'll be working. So they're recording videos of the practice, and then they're also doing virtual video-based interviews. And I think this is an excellent strategy because the candidate can still see the place where they'll be working without having to travel there during this time of uncertainty until people feel safer and more comfortable. And seeing the videos is creating a higher level of interest among candidates because they can still see into the practice without physically going into the practice. Now, video interviews can be more challenging than face-to-face interviews or in-person interviews. So employers have to take the necessary steps and they have to prepare. So I have 5 steps that employers can take when it comes to video interviewing. And the first step is to choose a platform for conducting the interviews and to run tests. There's a number of platforms that you can choose from. Some are offering great deals right now. One of those is Microsoft. They're offering a 6-month trial of the premium version of Microsoft Teams, but there are other options such as Google Hangouts, Skype, Zoom, and WebEx. My personal favorite is Zoom because it's so easy to use, and I would say that that's been the most popular among our clients. But test the system, make sure that the quality is good, the strength of your internet signal is good. The second step is to build a plan and share it with everybody in the process. And this advice goes for in-person interviews too, but it's even more critical for video interviews. Some people on your team may not be as accustomed to using video interviews. So you want to make sure that everybody is prepared. You want candidates to sense that your organization has its act together. You don't want to brand yourself as being disorganized. So you want to show candidates that your practice can adapt quickly to the changing times, and you can create a professional video and do a professional video interview with excellence. The third tip is to choose an appropriate space and setting for the interviews. So this is where candidates are going to see you and the members of your team, and your space is what's going to contribute to their opinion of you and your organization. So make sure that it's clean, well lit, professional, uncluttered, and then that there's nothing nearby that might contribute noise or some other interruption. And then the fourth step is to reassure candidates by communicating and setting expectations. So just like you would communicate well with the members of your hiring team, you also want to communicate well with the candidates that you're interviewing. You tell them what platform you'll be using, what's expected of them, a timeline for when things will happen, and a phone number to call in case things don't go as planned. And then the fifth tip is to focus on engagement. Engagement was a priority before, and now it's even more important during a video interview, because you want to sell the opportunity, the organization, the culture, and everything about your opportunity. You want to present yourself as warm and engaging. And just remember that it's a two-way street. You're evaluating the candidate, but they're also evaluating you. And remember to smile. Next slide, please. So for candidates, the same advice. Make sure that you know what platform the employer is using. Choose an appropriate space. Have a professional backdrop, dress professionally. You want to give the employer a positive impression of you. And since it's a video interview, you have to speak loudly and clear enough. So if you're a soft speaker, you might have to speak up. And it's a good idea to practice. If you have a friend that you can practice with, do a mock interview if you have the technology available. And even though it's a video interview, you still want to send a thank you note after the interview. Next slide, please. I know that some people have lost their jobs because of this pandemic. The good news is that once this situation is over and the lockdown and the shelter-in-place orders are lifted, at some point the economy and the marketplace will gear back up and hiring will increase again. In the meantime, there are some things that you can do to prepare. And one of those things is to manage your mindset correctly. Don't let fear dictate your decisions and your actions. When you're fearful, it's hard to make rational decisions. The opposite is usually true. People often make irrational decisions when they act in fear, and irrational decisions do not result in success. And fear can shut down our brains. And I'm a big fan of Brian Tracy, who's a motivational speaker and a writer. And he says you have to attack fear head on. When you try to ignore your fears grow, but when you face your fears, they shrink. And that does work. And I know that the road ahead is uncertain, but when you think about it, the road ahead is always uncertain. Nobody has a crystal ball where we can see the future predicted and plan for it. So instead of focusing on the negative circumstances, on current events, let's focus instead on the other side of this calamity, the side where the virus is under control and life will eventually go on to a more normal state. So if you're not focused on the market recovery before it happens, then you won't be properly prepared for when it does happen. And there's an analogy that I like to use, and that is surfing. I'm not a surfer, but I do know some things about surfing, and you can't decide that you're going to ride a wave as soon as the wave reaches you. It doesn't work that way. If you try it, the wave will wipe you out. You'll find yourself flailing in the water and your surfboard churning. So as any surfer knows, you have to start paddling in the direction of the wave before the wave reaches you. And then at the right time, you stand up on your surfboard, you catch the wave as it arrives, allowing it to carry you in the direction you want to go. It's the same with the market recovery and your career success. A wave of opportunity is going to come our way at some point in the future. And if you want to ride that wave and allow it to help you in your career or your business, then you have to start start paddling and preparing before the wave reaches you. In fact, you have to start paddling before you can see the wave, and you can't see the wave unless you're looking for it. So, we could see a rapid recovery. Once the pandemic and the lockdowns and the shelter in place orders are over, the economy could resume in earnest. People will go back to work, the unemployment rate will decrease at some point, production will increase, and once again, at some point, there will be more employment and career options. So you keep networking, even with social distancing protocols. You can still network online through LinkedIn, for example. Another thing you can do is look for opportunities to add to your skills. You can take time to reflect. Most of our social calendars are not as full as normal. Just take time to reflect on your career. Are you working in a supportive environment? Is your career in the hands of the right people? Are you at the point where you're reevaluating your priorities? So your answers to these questions as you reflect could have a large impact on the decisions that you make regarding your professional life once this crisis is over. Next slide, please. There's a lot of traits and attributes that are valuable in the employment marketplace, and I want to quickly talk about a few of those. I want to talk about resiliency, because the more resilient you are as a person, the more valuable you'll be not only to your employer, but also to yourself. So attributes of resilient people are that they're flexible, both in their thinking and approach. They have the mindset of whatever it takes to get the job done. So they'll continue to strive, to adjust, they'll adapt to find a solution. Be a problem solver. The problem solver is the opposite of a negative Nelly or a complainer. Resilient people are self-motivated. They are they're intrinsically motivated, not extrinsically motivated. So their motivation comes from within. They're the ones pushing themselves to achieve and be successful. Resilient people manage stress well. It's how we respond to stress is important. So the amount of stress that a resilient person can handle is typically more than somebody who's not resilient. So how you're reacting to what is going on around you is crucial in determining your level of resiliency. Resilient people don't give up, and that's perhaps the most important attribute of a resilient person, not giving up regardless of the situation or how many defeats they've endured. So you can increase your resiliency if you make the decision not to give up. Next slide. And the last thing that I'd like to say is a big part of being resilient and thriving during this time is mental. And the mental aspect is very important. And I encourage people not to overlook this aspect. Some people sabotage themselves. They can't see anything other than the current circumstances and the circumstances happening around them. But the fact is that we're going to recover from this pandemic. And we recovered from the financial crisis and the Great Recession of more than a decade ago. We recovered from 9/11 and the bursting of the dot-com tech bubble. And during those recoveries, the economy and workers both prospered. So before those recoveries began, things were looking pretty dire. However, that's why it's important that this time that we focus on the market recovery and not on the pandemic. Kelly?
Thank you, Stacy. That was a lot of information to digest, but gosh, a lot's been going on in your world. And I agree, we all get to make choices about how we embrace every single day. We're going to embrace it with something moving forward, or are we going to let fear hold us back? Because, all we have is ourselves, really, at the end of the day, that we live with internally. But thank you so much. I hope this gives people some hope out there that there is some hiring going on, that there is some movement in the job market. It may not be what you expected. You may have thought there was none. So it is good to know that there is some out there. So thank you, Stacy, and thank you for coming. Tomorrow we have Dee Murphy with part 2 about the transitions to working to home. So I hope you all join us then. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.